Hey guys, good morning. So I want to do a very quick reaction because I'm getting a lot of people asking me about this Zack Polanski's comments on Vladimir Putin. So for people who don't know, Zack Polanski is the leader of the Green Party trying to make it more acceptable to the broader public, trying to modernize the Green Party. And right now, he's trying to become the next Zoran Mamdani, the politician who just won the mayoralty in New York. And this week or last week, I think it was this week, yeah, it was 2 days ago, he came out with one of the most bizarre statements that I've heard from a man who's trying to win an election, which makes perfect sense when you realize he's a Green, so he's more on the far left than the center left. But just to set the scene, Zach Polanski said that he would try to persuade Vladimir Putin to give up his nuclear weapons because, and I'm quoting, it would be sociopathic behavior to say you wouldn't negotiate with a president or prime minister. Now, I'm scrolling down here, and he takes a very normal Green position that he wants to see everyone denuclearize. And the really shocking thing you could say is that when he was pushed back upon by a presenter on Channel 4, I believe, who said that this would be a miracle if you made Russia or Putin give up their nuclear weapons, Polanski's only reaction was that you can't laugh at peace. That's, and again, I'm quoting from here on out, you could have laughed at the point of Nelson Mandela negotiating with the ANC, or we could have laughed at the Irish during the Troubles. I think it's always impossible until it's done. And I think it's really important. I don't think it's likely. I think that's a different question. But there's something, even if he doesn't think it's likely, the fact that he's making this a major position, he's turning this into a major PR activity makes very little sense in the grand scheme of things when you think about people who actually want to be elected and win elections. But what this does speak to is the fact that the far left still continues to live in this very odd bubble that doesn't necessarily quite make sense. Now, I've had a lot of reactions to my own statements on this, saying that it was naive of him to say this, that he shouldn't, that it was ridiculous that he thinks that he can convince Putin to give up nuclear weapons. I think I mentioned somewhere that he's making the same errors Donald Trump has been making, the current far-right American president, who keeps trying to bring Putin to the negotiating table, keeps trying to bring him in to discuss it and work together on in good faith, despite the fact that Vladimir Putin has zero interest in any of this, that he's a revanchist, he's trying to resurrect the borders of the Soviet Union, and that Putin has no way of benefiting from this kind of situation. And one of the reactions I got, which was quite interesting, was that people like myself, who think this is a ridiculous statement to make, that thinks that this is unrealistic, that thinks that, in my opinion, Zach Polanski would do better just focusing on domestic UK issues, with the economy, with the industrial base, with all of these major issues that are actually impacting British people all over the place. Apparently because, and I'm quoting once again to this person who obviously has a hammer and sickle as their profile picture, that I sit astride 3/4 of a century of monstrous failed mad logic, like Dr. Strangelove astride the bomb, and that we need to take a new approach before my thinking literally ends the world. Now, as poetic as that is, there is a simple reality that a lot of people tend to forget about in geopolitics and international politics, and whether you're taking an institutionalist position, a constructivist position, a realist, or a liberal position. The reality is that when you have a hostile actor who's constantly attacking neighbors, who's constantly making threats, who's constantly attempting to undermine the states around it, that's constantly trying to break apart the states around it, and that has a history of actively invading countries left, right, and center. We're talking Georgia, we're talking Chechnya, we're talking Ukraine right now, we're talking the activities that are going on clandestinely in European member states. You have the activities in Armenia, in the attempted formation of Abkhazia. You've got all of these activities that Putin has been engaging in. That shows that he's not interested in peace. He doesn't care about what's happening. He doesn't care about these very floaty, these very dreamy ideas of global kumbaya, where we're going to all work together and hold hands and sing together and become friends. That's not who Putin is. That's not what his politics are. And that's not what Russia is seeking right now. And you can see this very clearly in the way that Putin approaches nuclear weapons. Now, even ignoring the fact that Russia right now is an economy that's overheating. They can't pay their workers in nuclear factories. There are bare shelves. They have really big issues when it comes to actually maintaining population density in certain communities that are essential to feeding and making the nation function. They are struggling to, despite the fact that theirs is a highly militarized society at this stage in time after 3 or 4 years of the Ukrainian invasion, or the invasion of Ukraine, I should say, they still cling, or because of all of this, they cling to the fact that they don't have many things going for them. Their nuclear facilities aren't in great shape. Their industry is in a terrible shape. And the only thing that actually keeps Russia safe right now, or not safe, but gives them a sense of security, is the fact that they have nuclear weapons in abundance. Now, despite the fact that a lot of their silos, a lot of their systems are dated, a lot of them may not work, there have been several scares recently in the last couple of years where Russian nuclear weapons have actually been in a... I mean, there were some false testing situations where they attempted to test some of the nuclear weapons, and if it had been a real nuclear weapon, it may have exploded in the silo, creating another Chernobyl or creating another nuclear catastrophe that nobody wants to see. I think it's also important to state that while some of us take a harder line on Russia and their nuclear capabilities, that we don't want to see nuclear catastrophe in Russia. We do not want to see Russia bombing itself. We don't want to see Russia bombing others. We want Russia to deal with things. But the reality is that Russia is hostile. Russia wants to see the end of the European Union. Russia wants to see a collapse of the American states and American prosperity and the end of the American dream. Russia wants to see a liberal world order that's going to see a lot of the actors that we're seeing today, such as the AfD and La Front National and the British National Party or Reform or whoever. They all want to see this liberal order that means that they can take control. They can put in place their very bizarre way of doing things. And the fact that you have someone like Zack Polanski who thinks that you can negotiate with someone who's actively installing fifth columns in our countries, who is actively threatening nuclear Armageddon with one hand and pretending with the other that he's our friend and, he's the victim. That you've got Vladimir Putin disturbing, okay, this is very Belgian, sure, Belgium is Belgium, but actively attacking certain states by using external actors to disrupt our transportation systems and disrupt our trade and disrupt our industrial capacities by blocking trade routes with drones and shutting down airports and actively, and this happened, I think it was 5 or 10 years ago, I can't remember now, but actively hacking and bringing down the National Health Service in the UK and engaging in clandestine assassinations in the UK and in Europe, funding gangs that are hiring young people in our countries to engage in criminal activity and stretch thin services that are already not in great shape. It just shows a lot of naivety It shows that Zach Polanski doesn't really have the chops to really be Prime Minister of the UK. And look, I'm a liberal, I'm a social liberal, whatever. I vote for Macron in France. I've campaigned for Macron. I've campaigned for several candidates across places. I worked with Gina Miller in the UK. Everybody knows I'm a federalist. I'm pro-European, whatever. I would give a fair shot to any political leader who can show some sense of logic and rationale and shows that he has a plan to actually make things happen. You know, I think Keir Starmer, despite the fact that he's too timid and he really needs to start learning to fight like he was during the elections, deserves a fair shake. Likewise, if Zach Polanski hadn't come out with, we need to work with Putin, Putin will give up nuclear weapons if I ask him, nya, 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 I would have been very clear and said, Zach Polanski deserves a shot. Just like I've said the same thing about Zoran Mamdani in New York. If Zoran can make things happen in New York, if his plan can actually work, if he shows that his political plans can actually change the lives of citizens and make New York a better place and bring New York's reputation up and its capacity up and make it a leading city, and it already is, but you know what I mean, in the United States, and even show a new way of fighting against people and populists like Trump who actively prey on the fears and the pain and the sadness of working class people. Do it. Prove us wrong. Make things happen. But Zach Polanski clearly can't do that. He's thrown himself into two ridiculous scandals. One, the Putin situation, and two, the fact that the UK should leave NATO because of Trump. Zach Polanski is the epitome of this bizarre naivety that you see on the far left, that they don't understand that just because you really want something to be the case, that's not going to happen. It's a very spoiled and childish mentality. Not only that, it's part of this mentality that you see on the far left, and you see this in France with Mélenchon, you see this in Germany with the not Baby, was the Sarah, whatever her name was. You see this in Belgium, you see this in the UK, you see especially in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn, that because they can imagine a world where things are so nice and everybody's friendly, because they can imagine an idea that you don't need guns anymore, everything's wonderful, that because people haven't made that happen straight away, and I think this is a really important thing to bring up, that everybody not doing this is actively doing this because they're antagonistic or they're militaristic or they are hostile to the idea of peace. And a part of this comes from a clear naivety, but also from a clear ignorance of history and what we have had to do in history to assure peace. So World War I wasn't won because suddenly everybody looked at each other and said, what are we doing? We need to be friends again. World War II wasn't won, and the Holocaust didn't magically end because everybody went, you know what, guys? This was a bad idea, which it was. And I think Germans, broadly speaking, understand that it was, and most people understand that war is a bad idea. But you don't win peace against genocidal maniacs or militaristic leaders or revanchists or people who simply do not respect the lives and the cultures and the existence of their neighbors. You win peace in these situations by being able to fight for it and making sure that these people understand that they cannot simply just roll in, shoot everybody, and take over. You don't win peace by bending over backwards and giving in to this very bizarre sense of, got the word in French in my head, but not in English, this entitlement, that's the word. You don't give in to entitlement of world leaders who just think that they can take what you have and refuse to give you anything. And the fact that you always have this wing of politics that are anti military just as for whatever reason. Because you have these people who don't understand the fact that you have to have power to be able to ensure peace. Because these people don't understand that the fact we have militaries for a reason, and that is because you need to actually defend your own existence and defend your ability to exist and defend the ability of your colleagues and your friends and your allies and your neighbors to exist. Because otherwise, the bad guys will just have more guns. They will come and take what they want. This sounds really naive. This sounds like a really bizarre right wing, securitist, militarist point of view and idea. But I think it's very important for everybody to understand that this isn't a right wing idea, just like liking bicycles isn't exclusively a left wing idea, or being anti car isn't necessarily a far left idea, or whatever, right? A lot of this is just common sense and thinking through things that need to be thought through. Because otherwise, you don't actually come to the conclusions that you need to be an effective actor in the political sphere right now, and especially in the global political arena that we have today. And I think it's quite sad that you have leaders who could potentially affect quite a lot of change. They could affect positive. They can have a positive impact on their countries, and they can have a positive impact on the political discussion in the world. Because let's face it, political plurality is how we got here in the first place. Political plurality is how we end up testing and figuring out which ideas work best or how we can combine different things. You know, the simple fact that in France we can debate the Zuckman tax, or that we're going back to debates, or that we can have debates on pension reform, as comical and as frankly fucking ridiculous as that can be. The fact that we have had decades-long debates on the provisions of and the benefits and the negatives of nuclear fuel and nuclear power and nuclear weapons is how we get to the point where we can actually say, okay, we need this and this is what we need to follow. And this is the ideas that we need to make sure that we're defending. Because otherwise we don't progress. And otherwise we don't actually get to the point where we can reach the next stage of our societies. And this is how, otherwise we would never have gotten to the stage where we have the European Union today, or ASEAN, or TTIP, or whatever you want to call it, right? But saying that and having said that, you can't just come up with every stupid idea that comes to your head either, just because you either think that it works and you don't actually understand that it just doesn't really hold water, or because you just want to be in the PR race, you just want to be in the news, you want to do this. And while I personally think that this is Zack Polanski purely being a naive, not particularly well educated in this domain individual, I also do wonder if he's not done this purely because he also wants to get a bit of attention. Because people stopped talking about him with Zoran Mamdani's victory in New York, and people kind of stopped talking about him because, you know, he benefited a lot from the right wing going after him and attacking him. And now the right wing have turned back to the EU and are attacking these new anti-corruption laws and anti-money laundering systems and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, to cut a long story short, because this was intended to be more of a short reaction, I don't think this, unless you're really baked into this really left-wing revisionist movement and you don't really understand geopolitics and you think that you can just be friends with genocidal maniacs, I don't think that this has done Polanski a lot of favors and this has made them look a bit dumb. Now, you guys may have different opinions to me. I'd love to hear them. You know, even if you won't have the chance to put in a quick comment here in the chat below. You can always comment later on the Substack post. You can comment on the YouTube video that's going to come out of this. You can even DM me positive messages, hate mail. Apparently, lots of weird admiration that I'm getting through that Q&A thing that I set up a couple of weeks ago. But look, I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to understand what you guys think, because as a geopolitical expert, as a guy who has studied geopolitical language, security, I know this topic like the back of my hand. Nothing Polanski has said makes any sense. It doesn't hold any water, and it just sounds delusional and it sounds naive. Now, let me know what you guys think. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it, especially because I keep promising these lives, I keep promising Twitch streams, and then something always comes up and I have to go run for a meeting with someone or go take care of some work or whatever. But I appreciate the patience. I appreciate the support. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys' opinions of this situation and Zack Polanski and the Putin comments are, and let's have a conversation. Till then, have a great rest of your day, have a great week, and speak to you